The morning sun cast long shadows through the ornate windows of Buckingham Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, adjusted her navy blue dress one final time. She had no idea that within hours, a piece of jewelry would set off a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of the royal family. The sapphire ring on her finger caught the light, its deep blue stone surrounded by diamonds gleaming with an almost supernatural brilliance. Catherine walked through the palace corridors with her usual grace, greeting staff members with warm smiles. She had grown comfortable in her role over the years, but today felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a sense of anticipation that she couldn't quite place. As she entered the blue drawing room where the family gathering was scheduled, she noticed several members of the household staff exchanging meaningful glances. Queen Camilla was already seated in her favorite chair near the fireplace, her posture rigid and her expression unreadable. The relationship between Catherine and Camilla had always been cordial but distant, marked by polite conversations and carefully choreographed public appearances. Yet beneath the surface, there had always been an undercurrent of something unspoken, a tension that neither woman had ever directly addressed. As Catherine took her seat, she unconsciously touched the ring on her finger, a habit she had developed over the years. It was more than just a piece of jewelry to her, it was a symbol of her place in the royal family, a tangible connection to the legacy she had married into. The ring had been given to her by William on a special occasion, though its full history had never been completely explained to her. The room gradually filled with other family members. Princess Anne arrived with her characteristic briskness, followed by Prince Edward and Sophie. Each greeting was warm but brief, as if everyone sensed that this gathering was more than just a routine family meeting. William entered last, his eyes immediately finding Catherine's, offering her a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Before we begin," Camilla said, her voice cutting through the gentle murmur of conversation, "I believe there's something we need to discuss." Her gaze fixed on Catherine's hand, specifically on the ring that adorned her finger. The room fell silent, the air suddenly thick with tension. Catherine felt her pulse quicken. She had worn this ring many times before in Camilla's presence, so why was it suddenly an issue? She looked to William for guidance, but his face had gone pale, his jaw clenched in a way that suggested he knew something she didn't. "That ring," Camilla continued, her voice trembling slightly, "where exactly did it come from?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, loaded with implications that Catherine couldn't fully grasp. "It was a gift," Catherine replied carefully, her diplomatic training kicking in. "A family heirloom that William felt I should have." She kept her tone neutral, though inside, alarm bells were beginning to ring. Camilla's face flushed, her hands gripping the arms of her chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "A family heirloom," she repeated, each word dripping with barely contained emotion. "Do you have any idea what that ring represents? Do you know its true history?" The other family members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Princess Anne's expression had hardened, while Edward and Sophie exchanged worried glances. It was clear that everyone except Catherine knew something about this ring that she didn't. William stood up, moving protectively closer to his wife. "Camilla, this isn't the time or place. When would be the right time?" Camilla interrupted, her voice rising. "When were you planning to tell her the truth? Or were you hoping to keep it buried forever, like so many other family secrets?" Catherine's mind raced. What truth? What secrets? She looked down at the ring, seeing it suddenly, with new eyes. The sapphire seemed darker now, the diamonds less brilliant, as if the jewelry itself was responding to the tension in the room. "I think," Princess Anne said quietly but firmly, "that Catherine deserves to know the full story. She's been wearing that ring for years. She's part of this family now, and secrets have a way of causing more damage than the truth ever could." Camilla's laugh was bitter. "Part of the family? She's wearing the evidence of the biggest betrayal this family has ever known, and she doesn't even realize it." Her voice cracked on the last word, and, for a moment, Catherine saw not the composed queen consort, but a woman carrying deep, unhealed wounds. The room erupted in voices as several family members tried to speak at once. William's voice rose above the others, defending Catherine, while Edward attempted to calm the situation. But it was Camilla's next words that silenced everyone. "That ring belonged to someone who nearly destroyed everything we've built," she said, her eyes locked on Catherine's. Someone who was promised things that could never be delivered, who caused pain that still echoes through these halls. And now you wear it like it's just another pretty bauble, with no understanding of the lives it has touched, the promises it represents. Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. She wanted to remove the ring, to distance herself from whatever pain it was causing, but her fingers seemed frozen. "I didn't know," she said softly. "William never told me, because I asked him not to," a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see King Charles standing there, his expression grave. "The ring's history is complicated, Catherine, and I had hoped to spare you from the burden of the past. But it seems the past has a way of demanding to be acknowledged." Charles entered the room slowly, his eyes moving from his wife to his daughter-in-law. "That ring," he said carefully, "was commissioned by my grandmother for someone very special to her. Someone who was meant to be part of this family but whose path took a different turn. When that person left, the ring was put away, hidden from sight and memory. I'm not sure how William came to possess it, but I gave it to him," Princess Anne interrupted, her chin raised defiantly. "Mother kept it in her private collection. She told me once that it was waiting for the right person, someone who would wear it with the grace and dignity it deserved." When I saw how William looked at Catherine, I knew. Camilla stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You had no right," she said to him, her voice shaking. "That ring represents everything that went wrong, every promise that was broken, every heart that was shattered in the name of duty and tradition." "Or perhaps," Anne replied coolly, "it represents redemption. A second chance. A love that actually lasted, unlike the one it was originally intended for." The tension in the room was unbearable. Catherine could feel the weight of decades of family history pressing down on her, secrets and betrayal she was only beginning to understand. She looked at each face in turn, seeing pain, anger, defensiveness, and, in William's eyes, a deep sadness. "I think," Catherine said slowly, finding her voice, "that I need to know the whole truth. Not hints or illusions, but the actual story. If I'm wearing something that causes this much pain, I deserve to understand why." Camilla's face crumpled, and, for a moment, Catherine thought she might cry. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and fixed Catherine with a look that was part challenge, part plea. "The truth," she said. "The truth is that ring was meant for someone who loved too much and lost everything. Someone who was told they weren't suitable, weren't appropriate, weren't enough. And now you wear it as if none of that matters, as if that pain just disappeared." "The truth," Charles said firmly, stepping between his wife and daughter-in-law, "is more complex than that. And if we're going to discuss it, we're going to do so with the dignity this family requires." He looked around the room, his gaze stern. "Everyone out except Catherine, William, and Camilla. This is a conversation that should have happened years ago, but we'll have it now, in private." As the others filed out, Princess Anne paused by Catherine's chair. "Whatever you learn," she said quietly, "remember that the ring chose you. Mother always said objects carry the energy of their intentions, not their history. That ring has been waiting for someone who could transform its story from one of loss to one of fulfillment." When the door closed, leaving just the four of them, the silence was deafening. Catherine could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of the ring on her finger like never before. Whatever secret was about to be revealed, she knew it would change everything she thought she knew about the family she had married into. Camilla walked to the window, her back to the others, gathering her composure. When she turned around, her face was a mask of controlled emotion. "The ring," she began, "was commissioned in 1971 for a woman named Rosalind Ashton. She was everything the royal family could have wanted: beautiful, educated, from an impeccable background. And she was deeply in love with someone who loved her in return." Catherine's eyes widened as the implications began to sink in. She looked at Charles, whose face had gone very still, then at William, who seemed to be hearing some of this for the first time as well. "Rosalind was my cousin," Camilla continued, her voice steady but strained. "My closest friend from childhood. We did everything together, shared everything. When she fell in love, I was the first person she told. When plans were made for a future that seemed so bright, I helped her dream of what life would be like. The story unfolded like a carefully guarded secret, finally seeing light. Rosalind Ashton had been the woman everyone expected Charles to marry before duty and protocol intervened. The ring had been commissioned by the Queen Mother herself, a gesture of acceptance and welcome that had ultimately meant nothing when tradition demanded a different choice. She waited, Camilla said, her voice breaking. She waited and hoped even when it became clear that the fairy tale wasn't going to have a happy ending. And, when she finally accepted that she had to let go, she gave the ring back and disappeared from all our lives. I lost my cousin, my dearest friend, because this family decided she wasn't suitable enough. The silence that followed was heavy with decades of pain. Catherine looked down at the ring, seeing it now not as a beautiful piece of jewelry but as a symbol of broken dreams and lost love. What happened to her? She asked softly. She moved to New Zealand, Charles said quietly. Married a sheep farmer, had 3 children, and, by all accounts, lived a happy life. She died 5 years ago, never having returned to England after she left. And you, Catherine said, looking at Camilla with new understanding, you blame the family for losing your friend. Camilla's laugh was hollow. I was angry for years. Furious at the system that could destroy lives so casually in the name of propriety. And then, ironically, I ended up here myself, part of the very institution that had caused so much pain. But, the ring, William interjected, why does it upset you so much to see Catherine wearing it? Surely after all these years, because she doesn't know. Camilla's composure finally cracked, her voice rising to nearly a shout. She wears it without understanding its weight, its history, the lives it represents. Every time I see it, I see Rosalind's face when she gave it back, I see the dreams that died, I see. She stopped abruptly, pressing her hand to her mouth as if to hold back words that were fighting to escape. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I see what could have been, if this family had been capable of choosing love over protocol just once. Catherine stood slowly, her movements deliberate. She walked to where Camilla stood, close enough to see the tears that the older woman was fighting not to shed. I understand now, she said gently. The ring isn't just jewelry. It's a reminder of pain, of loss, of a system that hurt people you loved. That hurt everyone, Camilla corrected. Charles, Rosalind, me, even the Queen Mother who had commissioned it with such hope. We all lost something when that love was deemed inappropriate. Catherine looked at her husband, then at Charles, then back at Camilla. But, don't you see, she said, her voice growing stronger. William gave me this ring not in spite of its history, but because of it. We're the generation that was allowed to choose love. I'm the commoner who was deemed suitable. This ring doesn't have to represent loss anymore. It can represent change, progress, the evolution of an institution learning to value love over protocol. Camilla stared at her, emotions warring on her face. You make it sound so simple, she said bitterly. It's not simple, Catherine agreed. Nothing about this family is simple. But, maybe that's exactly why the ring needed to come back into the light. Not to cause pain, but to heal it. To show that the sacrifices of the past weren't entirely in vain, that they paved the way for something better. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed Catherine's words. Charles moved closer to his wife, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Rosalind would have liked Catherine, he said softly. She would have been happy to see her ring worn by someone who married for love and was welcomed for it. Camilla's shoulders began to shake, and, finally, the tears she had been holding back began to fall. It wasn't the desperate scream the palace staff had whispered about, but a quiet release of grief held too long. I miss her, she whispered. I've missed her every day for 40 years. Catherine made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She slipped the ring off her finger and held it out to Camilla. Take it, she said. Hold it. Say goodbye properly. Say whatever you need to say. Camilla looked at the ring in Catherine's outstretched hand, then, slowly, tremblingly, took it. She closed her fingers around it, holding it to her chest as tears streamed down her face. I'm sorry, Rose, she whispered. I'm so sorry I couldn't make it right. The 4 of them stood there, bound together by a shared understanding of the weight of history and the possibility of healing. After several long moments, Camilla opened her hand and looked at the ring one more time. Then, with a deep breath, she held it out to Catherine. "Put it back on," she said, her voice steadier now. "You're right. It's time for this ring to represent something new." Rosalind would hate to think of it hidden away, gathering dust and bitter memories. She was always about moving forward, finding joy even in difficult circumstances. As Catherine slipped the ring back onto her finger, it felt different. Not lighter, exactly, but transformed. It was no longer just a beautiful piece of jewelry or even just a family heirloom. It was a bridge between past and present, a symbol of how far they had all come. "There's something else," Charles said quietly. "Something I think you should know. Rosalind wrote to my mother before she left. She said she hoped the ring would one day find its way to someone who could wear it without the weight of sacrifice, someone who could have the happiness that circumstances had denied her. I think," he looked at Catherine with a small smile, "she would be pleased to know her wish came true." William moved to stand beside his wife, taking her hand in his. "I knew some of the story when Anne gave me the ring," he admitted. "But I also knew that Catherine was exactly the person who could redeem its history. She's changed so much about how this family operates, brought warmth where there was formality, accessibility where there was distance. If anyone could transform a symbol of loss into one of hope, it was her." Camilla wiped her eyes, composing herself with the dignity of someone who had learned to navigate deep emotions in public settings. "I owe you an apology," she said to Catherine. "My reaction was about my own unresolved grief, not about you. You've worn that ring with exactly the grace and dignity Rosalind would have brought to it." "We all carry our histories," Catherine replied. "The question is whether we let them define us or whether we find ways to honor the past while building something better for the future." As the afternoon sun shifted, casting new patterns through the palace windows, the atmosphere in the room had completely transformed. What had begun as a confrontation born of long-buried pain had become a moment of healing and understanding. "I'd like to know more about Rosalind," Catherine said. "If you're willing to share. I think understanding her story will help me honor what this ring represents." Camilla's smile was watery but genuine. "I have photographs," she said. "Letters. Memories I haven't shared with anyone in decades. Perhaps it's time." Over the following weeks, Catherine and Camilla spent hours together, going through old albums and letters, sharing stories and memories. The palace staff noticed a warmth between them that hadn't existed before, a connection forged through understanding and mutual respect. The ring remained on Catherine's finger, but its meaning had evolved. It was no longer a hidden reminder of past pain but a visible symbol of the family's ability to grow, change, and heal. When Catherine appeared at public events, the sapphire catching the light of camera flashes, she wore it with a new awareness of its significance. In private moments, she would sometimes find Camilla's eyes drawn to the ring, but now there was peace in that gaze rather than pain. They had found a way to honor the past without being imprisoned by it, to acknowledge loss while celebrating the love that had ultimately triumphed. The story of the ring became a closely guarded family secret, but its impact rippled through the palace in subtle ways. Conversations became more open, old wounds were addressed rather than ignored, and the rigid protocols that had once seemed insurmountable began to soften around the edges. Catherine often thought about Rosalind Ashton, the woman she had never met but whose story had become part of her own. She imagined her in New Zealand, surrounded by children and grandchildren, living a life that was different from what she had once dreamed but perhaps no less meaningful. And sometimes, late at night when the palace was quiet and she could hear only the distant sound of guards patrolling the grounds, Catherine would look at the ring and whisper a quiet thank you to the woman whose sacrifice had helped pave the way for her own happiness. The sapphire would catch the moonlight, seeming to glow with an inner fire, as if acknowledging the connection between past and present, loss and love, sacrifice and fulfillment. The ring had indeed been revealed, not just as a piece of jewelry but as a catalyst for healing, understanding, and the kind of honest communication that the royal family had often struggled to achieve. Camilla's desperate scream, when it had finally come, had been not one of anger but of release, allowing decades of suppressed grief to finally find expression and resolution. In the end, the ring served its ultimate purpose, not to divide, but to unite, not to remind of what was lost, but to celebrate what had been found. And, in wearing it, Catherine carried forward not just its beauty, but its complete story, a story of love, loss, redemption, and the enduring power of understanding to heal even the deepest wounds.